Hi guys, and welcome back to another IBRACORP video. Thanks for tuning in with us today. As usual, I'd really like to thank you for your support, your views, your subscriptions, your likes. Everything you do to support this channel has immensely helped out. Just before we jump in today's video guys, I'd like to introduce our new website. IBRACORP.io has had a bit of a facelift. And as you can see from our new site, we're here to introduce articles, blogs, and future instructional videos where they'll be posted here first. I've had some big news in the past few months. I did find out that I'm going to be a dad. They're going to be twin boys, which is really exciting. But in light of that news, I thought I need to look into some other options to try and help people out, while also helping myself and my family out. So I'm just giving you a heads up now that this is something I'd like to keep working on. Videos will be posted here first before heading over to YouTube. And on top of that, we're going to have articles that we write up. These articles will be instructional articles, and they'll also be free of charge. It doesn't cost you anything, and you can have this stuff sent straight to your inbox. So you can watch that right from your email address instead of having to go to YouTube. Thank you. So today we're going to be covering a subject that not a lot of people have set up for themselves, and they might be interested in doing so. Maybe you have looked into it and you've probably realized by now that a lot of the options out there are paid ones. Cachet is an open source status page system. As you can see right now, we're on their main website, cachethq.io, and we're going to dig into what it does, how to set it up, and where to go from here. Now if I just scroll down their main page, you can see some of the notes they've got. There isn't too much to really explain here. The idea is pretty simple. You've got a website that will run and alert you to status changes on the different services you might have. Maybe you've got a documentation site or website, any other APIs, which is also a great feature. Being able to integrate an API and allow the app to register whether those are up, down, and somewhere in between is pretty handy. Further, you can load incidents out of it too. So if a service goes down, it can automatically create an incident. You can see that it's crafted in a very nice UI using Bootstrap 3, which makes it quite responsive and it looks really, really nice. You can schedule maintenance, assess metrics, enable two-factor authentication, and you can have people subscribe to the status page so that they are alerted when a service goes down, which is pretty handy and saving you on that communication factor. So if you like the look of this, you want to see what it's all about, let's start installing it on our Unraid system and see how we can work with it. So we're back in Unraid. We're in our Unraid server Pumbaa, our faithful, old, faithful Pumbaa. Always there for us when we need to install something. Now, on my website that I showed you earlier, I have written an article, the first article for the website, on how to install MariaDB. And we're going to need MariaDB for today's video. If you're not sure how to do that, you know what? It's a win-win. Jump over to our page, have a read. It'll take you about 15 minutes, I think, to set it up at most, and then we can continue here. So once you've got MariaDB sorted and installed, as well as AdMiner, which is also covered in the article, jump over to the App Store. So now that we're in the App Store, you can see that there's two options for Cachet right here. Now, if they're not here by the time you watch this video, just search for it in the search bar. You're going to see two options. We've got Cachet and we've got Cachet URL Monitor. Find this on the App Store and then click to install. You can see here we're on the install page. We're going to change our network type to IBRACORP. Our database driver is going to be MySQL. If you are following my guide where you're using MariaDB, then you have an app key. Now, I've put in the description here, if you didn't realize, this is actually my template that I've created. No one has put it up on the App Store yet, so I thought it would be pretty handy to put it up for people. I have also linked the docs right there. Okay, now in the docs, it'll explain things in a little bit more detail. So as you can see, it wants a random string. Now, I highly recommend you don't just leave this default. I've put it in there for people, but you should really change that. Next, you've got your database host. So again, if you followed our guide and our article on how to set up the MariaDB, it'll be the IP address where you've got that installed. In our case, it's the same server, so we're going to change this. We need a database and a username. We also need a password. Now, we haven't created that yet, so what we're going to do is head back to our Docker tab, and we're carrying on from our guide that we've already done. Now, as you can see, we've got our server address and the port number. If you're not sure what that is, if you head back to your Docker, MariaDB, here's the address and here's the port number. Using the credentials that we set it up with, and click login. So now we're logged into our database server. We already have an Authelia database there, that's great. Did that in our article. So now we're going to make a new one. Click create database. Give it a name. You do not need to set the collation unless you have a specific reason. If you're following official documentation and it says a specific type of collation that it uses, then you can change it. Otherwise, just leave it. Click save. There you go, you just made a database. Pretty simple, right? Now that we've got a database, we need a user that can access it. Under privileges, we'll click on that. Click create user. Give it a username. Now, for simplicity's sake, guys, it's really handy to actually set the name of the database and the user to the application that you're going to be using it for. It just makes it easier to keep track of everything. So we've got our username there. We're going to create a password. I, of course, recommend that you are using different passwords to the one to your root database server password. Then hit all privileges. Scroll down to the bottom and click save. And now we've just created a database and a user that can access their database. If I just head back in the link there, there's our new database. Click on that. It's completely empty. There's no tables, there's nothing, okay? So now we can go back to our template here for installing Cachet. And we'll cross-check all the details. So the database, we've given it that name. The username, we've also given it that name. Then the database password. So this is the password that we just set for our user. A few of my last videos, guys, people picked up on things like I left an API key showing, or you can see the passwords. Those are all placeholders, and I do delete them after the creation of the video. But I still really appreciate people telling me, because you know what? You get tired, you're making these videos, sometimes you miss it. So, you know, if I miss something that you think is a security risk, hey, let me know. That's really important to know, and I don't mind being corrected. So thank you for that. So then we've got our database port. Now by default, 3306 is correct. Again, we can cross-check that there, 3306. Then your SMTP details. So if you haven't watched our Gmail video, how to use Gmail for your emails, please check that out. It'll make this so much easier for you. So in the case of Gmail, this is what it would look like. So we filled in our Gmail details there. So then the other dependency we need is a Redis container. Now, I didn't actually prepare for that. I didn't set up a Redis container yet, but I'll show you how easy that is. We'll just go to Redis. I've done it in some of my previous videos as well. We found our Redis container. We're going to leave it all default just for the purpose of this video, and then we're going to click apply. Now, if I just head to Docker, here's our Redis container, and it's running perfectly fine. I'll just give it a refresh, make sure, and that looks good. So if we head back to our template here, just make sure our details for Redis are correct. So the host is the server we're on, or the server we installed it on. The Redis database. Now, Redis is a transactional database and it works in terms of indexes. So instead of going in and creating a database like we did with MySQL, you pretty much give it an index number starting from 0. If you have not used Redis before, if you are not using it for anything else, then you would put 0 here. And this would mean that Cachet will use the 0 index for all of its transactions. If you are currently using it, you might have to think about what's the highest number you're currently using. And if you're up to say 1, then you might want to set this to 2. But that's totally up to you and what your environment is. And that's the reason it's there. Then you've got your port 6379. We head back. We can have a quick look. 6379 is there and that's the default. So just a quick skim over everything we've put in. That all looks pretty good to me. And click show more settings. You'll see our container port for Cachet. If 8000 doesn't work for you, this is where you can change it. App debug, we're going to leave that as false. And app data directory is usually where you want stuff installed. So now that we're ready, let's hit apply. Now that that's done, we can head back to our Docker container and we can see that it's running, which is always a good sign. Check the logs. And as you can see, there's stuff loading in here and it says it's installed. That's all good signs. That's all good signs to us. Now, if we close this and we head back to our adminer and we just go back to the database section here, click on Cachet. There you go. You can see all the tables now. And this is one of the things that the adminer is really good for. You can jump into a database and actually have a look at what it's doing. I don't recommend messing around with anything in here unless you need to, but a pretty handy thing that you might want to do is if you've set up something, you've stuffed it up, you don't know how to fix it, and it's just easier to reinstall because that's the beauty of Docker. What you can do is jump into your database. Instead of deleting the whole database, just tick all the tables in here and click drop. And that'll drop everything. Now that will delete everything, but it won't remove the actual database. So then you can just reinstall it and it will fill it again with new stuff. So head back to Docker and we'll go to the web UI. As you can see, it takes you to the setup wizard. As you can see, all the settings that we put into the startup parameters have been pulled across for us, so we don't need to worry about that. We have our cache driver. And for this, we're going to use Redis. View driver, we're going to use database. And session driver, we're going to use Redis because that's the purpose really of these Redis containers. It's good for a nice quick transactional data to come in and out. And we'll click next. So the next thing you've got is your site settings. So in here, we're just going to put in obviously the details for the site that you want to set up. For the site domain, put the fully qualified domain name. For the time zone, put obviously your time zone in there. Your language, and whether you want to show the support for Cachet button at the bottom of the page. Now, if you really want to support developers, leave it on. Click next. It's going to ask you for your admin account, so start creating that. And click complete setup. And there you go. So that's pretty much now configured and ready. Let's go to the dashboard and see what that looks like. It's going to ask us to sign in. And here you go. So at the moment, it doesn't look like much. There's nothing in here yet, so we haven't configured anything. You've pretty much set up the skeleton. The dashboard's ready. In the bottom here, you can actually select to see what it looks like to other people. So if we click that, this is what our page looks like. Pretty bare. So want to start customizing it, go to settings, into your application setup, you can start filling in some stuff. This is all depending on what you like. If you want it to automatically refresh, you can do that. So on our live site, for example, we have it to refresh every 60 seconds. Pretty handy. That way it's always got the latest information without people having to refresh it themselves. And then in here, you can use Markdown for this. So we can say page refreshes every 60 seconds, hit save. Then you've got the theme. So this is where you can change all the colors to anything that you might want. Now, if you want a quick tip with finding colors out, let's say you're not very advanced with CSS or HTML or whatever it is, right? You're not a professional at it. It's not your thing. I'll show you a quick way to do it. So we've got the page here, right? You press F12, bring up your console. Now in the side of the console, you'll see a whole bunch of stuff here under styles. Now what you can do is if you just click here, you see it says background color. Pretty obvious what it is, right? Now if you click it, you'll actually be able to change the color. You'll be able to pick it, you'll be able to mess around with it any way you like. Maybe you wanted a dark color, maybe you want it a bit more gray. Then you've got your main color here as well. So that changes the text or the accents. Maybe you like it like that, I don't know. Whatever, it's really up to you, isn't it? But this is a nice, easy way for you to visually see the changes without having to sit there, making the change, then refreshing it, then coming back again. I think this is a nice way to do it. So then what you can do is gives you the color code. Just click in there, Control C. You've now copied it. Now, as you can see, our setting to refresh every 60 seconds is kind of messing with us because it's just refreshed everything again. But we'll head back and now you can see a background color. We'll just put in what we just copied. There you go. Click save. Open it up again. And it's a little bit darker. A bit harder to tell, but it is a little bit darker. You can pretty much do that with anything really. Any other service where it lets you change colors. I think just a handy tip more than anything. So figure out what you like. There's plenty of stuff that you can change. Under the style sheet, if you have a custom CSS style sheet, you can just paste that straight in there. You've got your headers and footers as well. Localization. Security. If you want to put your analytics codes, put it directly into here. You can monitor your logs, check the credits, and then you can set up your mail. So if you were to click test, you can test your mail settings there as well. So that's your main settings for the actual app. All right, now once we've done that, let's go into components here. We'll add a component. And we'll say we want to check Overseer. Right, I don't know why I always end up with Overseer, but we'll check Overseer. So we'll start Overseer up. And in here, we'll call this Overseer. Now, as you can see, it lets you pick a status. So we'll say it's operational. Actually, you know what? Let's say it's got performance issues. We won't worry about a description. For the link, this is optional. You don't have to put it in, but if you do, it'll allow people to see what the link is. So that's a link to Overseer. We already know that works. If I come over to the domain there, we've already set that up in a previous video. I think that was our Cloudflare or Nginx video, one of those two. And any tags, so you can set tags if you like, and click create. So we've created our component. Great. We head back to our status page here and we'll refresh that. You can see now we've got other components, Overseer, and we've marked it as having performance issues. That also changes the main banner at the top. Say we're having performance issues there as well. So you might be thinking, well, what now? So you can create groups. Now for the groups, we can say it's a media app. So probably want to have it in media groups. Go back and edit the component and we'll pick the group media. Click save, come back here and refresh. Now we have this group that you can close and expand, and it gives you a little indicator there on how it's going. So how do we tell Cachet that this URL is actually working? Well, that's where this other container comes in handy, the URL monitor. So let's install that. Might be a bit quick here, guys, but I'm hoping that if you've watched some of my other videos, this should be pretty quick for you, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. So as you can see in this one here, I've set it up with minimal amount of parameters because it doesn't need much. So we've got that there, all looking good. We've changed our network and we'll press apply. And if we head back to Docker, we'll see our Cachet URL monitor right here, but it's stopped. Now the reason why it's stopped, and it'll probably tell you if you go into the logs, no file has been found. There's no config file. I'm going to show you what the config file looks like. Unfortunately, it doesn't create it for us, but it's pretty easy for us to create one ourselves. So I'll show you what that looks like now. So in our app data cashet URL monitor, I'll just bring that up in the file explorer. Here's our server that we're in, app data and cashet URL monitor. So it created our folder for us. I've had to manually put this file in here. Now I'll put a link to this off like Mediafire or something like that so you guys can download it. But this is what the file will look like. Now, what you're looking at from this point here, where it has endpoints, from line number 2 to 17 is one full endpoint, if you will. And if you go to the instructions, if you go to the Docker container for cashet URL monitor, you just click on it, you can see here the project page or the Docker Hub URL. You just go to that. And a big thanks to MTA Cachet, I think it is, for their work on this. Here's an example of their config file, guys. So maybe I'll actually just put this URL in the description for you. Just go to this description and you'll see a perfect example of a config file right here for you. Now, all I'm doing for you right now is just saving you having to read all of this for the basics, but please go and read it if you have more questions because it can do a lot of things. So we've got Visual Studio up just to have a look at this. Now, we're going to do one endpoint, which is our overseer one. So the first thing we'll do is modify some of this stuff. Change this to overseer. We can hit an external URL if we want, but what I would rather do for stuff that's internal is, you know, sometimes the app might be running internally, but your proxy address might be down. Okay, so it depends what it is you want to monitor. Now, if I want to monitor the actual app is running, the container is running, I'm better off using the internal address because the external address could drop off, but the internal one could be live. So what I'll do is actually just put the internal address and the port of overseer. Now the name again is overseer. Are you following me? I hope you are. So we've got the name, we've got the address, the local address. What are we checking for? The expectation is a HTTP status that is between range 200 and 300. So for example, if it gives us a 404 error, not found, that would be considered a failure, okay? Because it's outside the expectation. Then you're telling it what incident it would be if it went down. So it would be a partial outage. You know, it's just partial. It's not a big deal if overseer is down. That's not mission critical for us. So we're happy to leave it as a partial. Now you can also set an allowed fail. So maybe you know that the app can tend to fail often. Maybe you want to set it to a certain number before it changes the status on Cashet. Component ID. This one is an important one. As you start adding components, they're given an ID inside of Cashet. Now, if I just bring Cashet back for us. Now in Cashet, we add a component here. As soon as we add a component, it's given a component ID. Now the Cashet URL monitor wants to know what the component ID is. If you don't put the right ID, it's not going to be monitoring the right entry. Once the component ID is given, I believe that it stays that way in the database. So let's just go to the source. Let's go to the database, which is why we still want add miner. Let's go back to add miner and we'll just refresh this. Make sure we've got the latest info. So as you can see, we've got our components. If we head over to the row, this will give you a list of all the rows that we've got, a list of components. Now, as you can see, the ID is 1. We know that it's for overseer. Here's the link. Here's all the stuff that we set up basically, but our component ID is 1. So if we take that back to here, component ID 1, that's correct. We haven't set up a metric ID. If you want to, please read the documentation for the plugin. Then you have a frequency. Now, I personally like to set the frequency to match what the refresh page option is in Cashet. Now we've got 1 minute refresh, so we'll get it to check every 60 seconds. And that just keeps it all the same. Then you've got the settings for Cachet. So we've got the URL. URL needs to hit the API. This should be the same for you unless you changed any of this, apart from the IP address possibly. Then it wants a token, so it's got a type token and a value which is empty. So we get the value from Cachet. So let's go get that. So we're back in Cachet, and what we need for our plugin is the API key. Find the API token, click on your profile, which is just up here. As you can see, here's our API token. Highlight that token, click copy. Head back to your config file and paste it in the value section. Now, because this is a YML file, be very wary of your spacing. As you can see, there's one space there, and that looks correct. So we've got our token saved. That's all we need. You can also use webhooks, which we're not going to use today, but if you would like to, you can do that. Now, what that allows you to do, for example, is set up push notifications to a particular type of app, maybe Duo, for example. Then you've got the messages, so you can have customized messages. So if an incident is out, blah, 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 the name of the app is unavailable, etc. That's pretty much it. Now, let's say you added a few more components. All you need to do, copy all of it from there, drop it a line, and paste it underneath. And then anywhere you see the hyphen is the next app. So in this case, you could call it something else. And we've only got one app, and we want to leave it that way for this video. So that should be fine. Let's click save, and we have that saved. Head back to Unraid, and let's try start it up again now that we have a config file. If we just read the logs while it does it. Now that's looking a lot better. So what it's done is it's checked for the status, it's monitoring the URL, and it's realized that we're in the range that we've set it to. It's changed the status to operational. So let's go to our page. This is the page here. We're going to wait for this to refresh. It should be refreshing any time now. We haven't had to restart Cachet. The data should be fed straight through. I will note that if you make any changes to the config file for the plugin, you will need to restart the plugin container to pick up those changes. So let's refresh this. And there you go. So it's actually changed that for us now. Okay. Let's change it to operational. So we haven't had to intervene with that. If you didn't have the plugin, it would never know. It doesn't actually go and check by itself. So we've just changed that. It's changed it for us and it's made it operational. Now, if I quickly just go and disable Overseer, we'll just stop the container there. Now we're on our Cachet page and I've got the log up for the plugin URL. You see the last check it did there, 8:58, no changes to component status. So that's the last time it checked. So we'll just keep an eye on that and we'll watch as it monitors. And there you go. So it's triggered now. It said we've tried to reach it, it's unreachable. That's a failure. Partial outage initiated. Now if I just manually refresh this page, there you go. It's updated it for us. Partial outage. Exactly as we said it. So that's pretty much setting that up. Now the other final part is obviously pushing this externally. So we want to get this status page up so that you can reach it externally. Otherwise it's kind of pointless, right? On the subject, I will also note, having the status page system running on the same system that you're monitoring, I mean, that's pretty redundant because if your entire server goes down, you're not going to be able to get to the status page either. All right, so the best scenario is that you have this completely externally somewhere else and it's dialing in and monitoring it remotely. But you know what? All of us people at home, we don't want to spend that sort of money. So this is just for fun, really, unless you have a business reason to do it. If you are using it for business reasons, do it externally. So let's go on to reverse proxy it really quickly. Now, every time I do this, I do it a little bit quicker, guys, because I've covered it so many times. There's videos just on this, okay? But let's do it really fast. So add proxy host. We'll call this status.ibracorp.org. We're going to forward it to our status page. We can let it cache, and we'll provide WebSocket support. We'll give it our Cloudflare CDN certificate, which I have a video on as well, and click save. Now that's not going to work. Why? Because we haven't set up a DNS in Cloudflare. So let's quickly do the Cloudflare part. Here's Cloudflare, add record, CNAME, status, target is at the root. So we'll just put an @ symbol there, that puts it in for us, and click save. Done. Back in Nginx Proxy Manager, let's test our new URL out. And I made a mistake. I put in the wrong IP address. Click save. Let's try that again. And there you go. There's our status page. Now, my formatting is completely disgusting here. So you're probably not going to realize that this isn't really correct. So I'll show you what our live one looks like so that you actually realize it can look really nice. And here you go, guys. So this is our actual live website that we use for status. And you can see you can make it look pretty nice. And guess what? It costs $0. Using those 2 installs, those 2 containers, you can have the most basic functions working. There is a lot more that Cachet can do. There is a lot more that the URL plugin can do. So I highly recommend you read up on them and see if there's anything else in there that works for you. But hey, as a basic starting point, how easy was that? All right, we installed 2 containers, set up a config file, bang, there you go. Your own status page. So as far as Atlassian goes with their pricing for their status page, I think it's just absolutely highway robbery. And that's what pushed me to look at free and open source products. I hope you enjoyed our videos. If you do, please consider subscribing, liking, all that good stuff. We're nearly at 1,000. We're so close. And I want to share that with you guys because it's been a really, really cool, fun journey. Honestly, I've been doing this for a few months and I've just been really enjoying it. Again, if you liked, please check out our new website. Subscribe there. It's completely free if you're interested. There's a free membership option. It just means you get the videos first because I will be putting them up here first going forward. And if you want to help support me, I will be able to give you more help. If you have any suggestions, comments, let me know down below. Thank you very much. We'll see you in the next IBRACORP video.